Hey everyone. I don't know if you all know I did a presentation last night at the Red Victorian, another paranormal investigation and the spiritualist science kind of thing. Of course, you're going to have people who are thinking that those two words are completely opposite of each other, but really, actually, they're not. It's just that the definition of the words are misconstrued and missing pieces and parts. But anyway, that's not what I came to talk about today. Making sure that it's running, and it is running. I wanted to tell you about an experience that happened to me not last night, but this morning after I woke up the first time, and then I went back to sleep. And there was only one other person in the room, and so I went back to sleep, and I can tell you that I know where I was, but I don't know what happened, and I can tell you that I didn't care about what happened. I at first woke up as if I was on a bed in a room where it was in some place where it was dark, and I was really sad, and it was getting to me, and I felt myself almost start to cry almost. It was just one of those things. I wanted to see my mom. I was really upset. I felt abandoned and alone. But I wasn't sad for very long. The next thing I do remember is I was in a room with other people, and there was this one lady who was really nice to me. Not, I would say, mid-range woman, short, sandy blonde hair, mid-range body, just, nothing particular. Everything was average, just fine, like it is here in this world. And I remember her talking to me for a moment, and saying something to me about, the people that were there, and mill around and talk to them. It was kind of strange. I had to. I walked around, and I saw people who were upset. I saw some people who were just fine, like me. I wasn't quite sure. I knew. Let me put it to you this way: I didn't remember what happened to me. I didn't remember anything about why. None of that seemed important. I didn't even remember San Francisco. All I remember realizing is like, oh, I'm dead. and these other people were gathered around. Like I say, some were upset, and that's kind of when I realized a story started to form. A very strange story. It was a mixture. It was kind of almost alien and Earth human kind of story. It was very strange. There were all sorts of events happening all of a sudden that I could see, almost like a movie screen in front of me. There were events taking place. There were people fighting, escaping, not quite making it, and then ending up really in that space, in that combined space. People fighting who are on different worlds, who are in the middle of a war with each other. Things were going on, and some of the names of these places were kind of familiar because we've used them in our fiction. It was really strange. And then I was back in that room and talking to one woman who was hysterical that she left when she left, and she didn't want to go, and she was crying, and I was telling her it was going to be okay. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We're all here now. And it was kind of strange because in a way I didn't want to be the one to soothe these people or have to talk to anybody if I didn't need to. But at the same time, I wasn't bitter or nasty. Nothing like that. I didn't feel any of that. It was just kind of odd that I was the one. I still needed to get my feet on the ground and find out why I was being shown all these images of battles taking place and wars and people trying to escape and children who didn't quite make it out of a war zone, and wherever in reality these were taking place. Again, I wasn't reading anything like this before I went to sleep or anything. I didn't read anything. I wasn't watching any films. I wasn't doing any of that. I was tired. I'd done my presentation at the Red Vic. I went and did the dishes as well because that's a community thing. So I decided I'd go ahead and do the dishes at the end of the night. Not a hard task at all. And then I went up to bed around 1:30 a.m. or something. So, and again, I woke up very vividly in this world. It was definitely not any kind of standard dream. It took a moment for me to figure out, not very long. I said, oh, I left early. I remember thinking that, okay, well, if I left just before turning 50, that sounds like a joke I'd pull anyway. But I wasn't disturbed by it. I knew all members of my family would pretty much know in lightning bolt across the country what had happened. And there was one friend of mine, a person I had not seen, who was a professor of mine and for years, and back in the early 2000s, and I gave him a call to tell him what had happened. I called him from the other side, and the first time I made the call out, the phone didn't connect. It dropped. And then I called again, and he picked up. And when I told him, I said, check my Facebook profile. I've passed away. And I said this to him. It was really very strange. It was Teddy I was talking to, and he'll know who he is, because there's only one person I've ever called that. And I told him to check my profile. I'm gone, and I'm sorry that I had to tell him like that. And he got really sad on the other side. Just, okay. And I said, I'll see you later. And I hung up the phone. On my end, it sounds almost ridiculous. And again, I wasn't reading any stories, and I hadn't done this for days, or hadn't been watching any shows or listening to any, just hadn't been. I'd been working on a lot of my presentation. They're working on my regular class stuff for Norwich. So I hadn't really been doing any of that other stuff. But as ridiculous as it sounds, I made a phone call to someone from that other side to tell them I passed away. And I'm sorry about that. And it's a friend I hadn't seen in years. And from time to time, he'll chime in wonderfully on my Facebook. He did about San Francisco, about Haight-Ashbury, and wonderful gay history before it was decimated. And didn't erase it; it just decimated it. It's a new kind of history now, gay history now. But anyway, go back to my story and to what I experienced. This vivid, super vivid world I was in. I was in the room, in a large factory-like room, and a part of the room was also like a playroom. It had movie screens, and it had kids' toys and other things. And I didn't go in that room. I just looked over into it. And there were little children playing there. And I realized those were kids who made it over, and they were just being soothed this way, the way they would know, the way that's comfortable for them. And I completely got that when I saw it, without even thinking about it. But I walked to the back of the room and went out a screen door. We were on a farm. And I was okay with being on a farm. It didn't bother me at all. And if you want to know why I keep turning my camera around, it's because I'm checking to make sure it's working. Checking over at the Botanical Gardens and the Spire over there, just in case you all don't believe I'm in Golden Gate Park. I went to the back door. I looked out, and there was a mountain there. This beautiful, tall mountain that reminds me of some of the mountains I see, and I saw in some of the mountains I see in Western North Carolina, in Wales, in Scotland, and in Alaska as well, in the tail end of Alaska. But I looked up this mountain and I went, there's beautiful shale mountains in heaven. I remember actually saying that. And then someone came up next to me and told me the rock wasn't shale, it was something else, and told me the name of it. I forgot what it was, but I just went, oh, okay. And I was completely amused by it. And I remember staring at that mountain and being very familiar with it. I also remember lying down to go to sleep, just to get some rest, because everyone was getting me tired. And I remember the lady that I talked about, whoever this woman is, a guardian or whoever, she came into the room and told me that this other woman that I had been talking to is a type 1A personality or something. And that I had to, check in on her. And so I didn't get much rest, per se. I went, okay, I'll talk to her, see how she's doing. Because she still wasn't dealing with this whole, where she was. She wasn't dealing with what had happened to her. Heck, I wasn't sure what had happened to me, but I was in a position to not care. And that's how I felt. That just didn't bother me. She was bothered, and could remember the whole thing. Me, it was almost as if I just took a vacation from where I was, a vacation from this body, from this life. It was very different, and I only remembered a tiny fraction of it, enough to call someone. It was truly an interesting deal. So I went and talked to this woman, and I also sat in a room full of people who were trying to deal with interpretation. So some of them were changing shape and changing form. They were changing into other life forms from other worlds and making contact with each other. Apparently they had also been human, but they had also been on these other places where they looked very different from us, larger creatures than us, and they were trying to figure out what shape they were trying to take. They were upset about where they were and having a hard time dealing with it emotionally. And I had to be in a room full of these people trying to figure themselves out. Maybe it was my therapy, because maybe I was blocking things. I don't know. It was really crazy and very vivid. And again, I was never at any point upset. Slightly amused? Yes. And my character, the way I act now as a person when I'm teaching and when I'm doing stuff and when I'm observing things, was exactly like that there. I was just observing things, amused. Not entirely sure why am I being asked to watch this. It was really interesting, extremely vivid, and I actually don't recall having an experience like this for this extended period of time for a very long time. Even my near-death experience in 2011 was very short, unforgettable. Never forgot one moment of it because it was very vivid. But that truly was a place where I willed myself out of my body. I was in such terrible shape and had such bad depression. But this case, this wasn't the case. It was almost like I was just visiting. And even if I wasn't just visiting, it didn't seem like I would have cared if I came back or not. I just didn't really remember anything other than my friend that I hadn't seen in many years. So I was in a room full of people who were just changing shape and doing things, and really, that was really odd. And it got to me a bit, and I just left the room, went back off to another side porch into this place that had porches on it. It was strange. But I went out the side porch of this place, and there's the farm again, and there were these people working the farm. I stepped outside. Some of them were human looking, but they were very large people. When I say large, I mean they were huge, tall. We're talking 9, 10, 15, 12, 15 feet high. They were huge, but they were human. And then there were some who weren't quite. They looked like they were a combination of one person and a smaller person attached to them, almost like a hydra. Really odd looking, but I didn't weird out. I just went, okay. And those who are, and then there were those working around the farm, and a couple of people were working on a machine in a building across from where I was sitting on the porch. I had actually gone out, walked outside, realized I wasn't wearing any shoes. And the insects started to they were everywhere. The insects were buzzing all over the place and crawling all over the ground. And I thought to myself, okay, I shouldn't be out here without shoes. So I'm going back to the porch. Went back to the screened-in porch, sat down, looked out over at the other building, and these big guys, these huge guys, were working on a machine, and they screwed it up. And they dropped their tools, said, oh no, and they ran, and I put my fingers over my ears, and the machine exploded in a bunch of little pieces. And the one guy, big, tall, bearded guy, said, yeah, this is what happens when you do it wrong. Look at this. And he picked up a piece of the machine and went, one and done, and threw it down. He actually said, one and done. And I was amused by that. They were farm workers. They were doing stuff around this place. So wherever this place was, there were others kind of living a life in that space and doing things in that space. So I was completely amused by that. But I remember thinking, okay, so I'm probably going to get used to wherever this place is. And then I went back inside and I went looking for a professor friend of mine, not the one I was talking about, but another one who, believe it or not, I only recognized and remembered him for that place. He's not someone I know here in this life over here. He's not someone I know here. But I found him and I said to him, because we were waiting for him in a room, made him to come in and give a lecture. I said, "Are you going to keep playing this professor role for very long? We're all in there waiting for you, by the way." And I knew the guy, knew his face, knew his name, and he knew me. But again, in this lifetime, I don't know him. I've never seen him before. But there, I totally recognized him as if he were my best friend in the world. And I was just bantering him. But in all of this, I kept remembering that there was some sort of huge conflict between other worlds. It's not necessarily, I'm not talking about Earth necessarily, but there was some other things going on, and this whole thing kept referencing back to where all these people were coming from, and while they were coming to this location where I was, not in San Francisco, but in the space where I was, where this vivid, you can call it a vivid dream, but again, I think that I had actually, almost as if I had been called to the other side to temporarily stand in for someone who was off somewhere and trying to fight something or trying to help people get out of the way of something or to pass quickly. I would just say that it's a terrible injustice to understatement to say that death is an illusion. It is not what everyone thinks it is. That's an understatement. That's an understatement and an injustice to understatements. To make that statement. I did not expect to have this event. I've had vivid events happen before, very vivid. So I believe that I've probably jumped over to this similar space before, except this time I was actually being interactive with everyone there and other people, and the lady who seemed to be a guardian, but she was a guardian to so many. And she was kind of director of the program, but for some reason I was one of her assistants and she just needed my help. And it was really kind of strange. I realized, okay, I'm doing exactly the same thing that when I woke up, I realized I was doing exactly the same thing there as I do here. Helping out Red Victorian people, checking in if they need help, or if I'm someplace else and folks need help, I'm always the one to step up and help with the situation. This is not something I try to do, it's just something that is. And it's not something I always want to do, but it's there. It's really strange, but I remember thinking to myself, well, I remember what age I was when I left. I was 49 and short of 50 by a couple of months. Less than a couple of months. So I went, okay, so I left early. I didn't leave at age 86. I decided to leave early. What I had been missing was that I wasn't leaving permanently unless I wanted to, unless I chose to leave permanently, because I had no memory of my life here. I would say about 99% of no memory. Not where I was teaching, not what I was doing, not even what city I was in before when I left to come over there, nothing. Because none of it seemed to be important. It just wasn't important in the moment. Everything else was, though, and I was being asked to help out. And it was a temporary trip that I took, apparently. Because then I woke up 2 hours later than I ever would have woken up here. And I realized just how vivid it was. It didn't go away. It didn't fade. It took me another hour and a half to tell you all about it after I got my thoughts together. I was going to Facebook Live this, but I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to have to take that chance, and I don't really care what people say about it. And if people decide that I'm not worthy of being their friend because, I took seriously what must have been a ridiculous dream, okay, then you and I have no more to say in this lifetime. Then that's the space you're in, that's the space you're in. This is the space I'm in. But I realized decades ago that what was called vivid dreams were actually trips out, where we left the body we're in for a moment and we returned to whatever dimensional space we actually exist in, as a kind of superconscious that split itself into trillions of countless versions of itself. We call I've heard called individuations or whatever. And then we simply exist as if we're separate of each other, but we're really not. We're really the same people down there, the children over there, the birds flying in the sky, the ants crawling on the ground, the roaches. really just individuations of the same energy. But who's going to have fun with that? Let's just pretend like we're all separate and doing separate things, and because that's how you amuse yourself, I suppose. Um, it's truly amazing. I'm not remotely religious about any of this stuff. I'm not applying any religious notions to any of it because it doesn't work for me that way. For those it does work for that way and they have to apply that kind of stuff, okay, go for it. If that works and that's the only way you can deal with it, do a Jesus name drop or your Krishna name drop or Allah name drop or Muhammad or Buddha, whoever. That's cool. Then perhaps those entities or those fractions or those individuations will make a presence known because that's the only thing that will make you comfortable. Then so be it. Then that's what happens, and that's the space you are in. It's already well known and understood that sort of thing doesn't make me particularly impressed one way or the other. I don't mind them. I'm not impressed by them and awed. Because that's just not how I operate mentally. So I guess you can say that space takes the shape of how you operate mentally and where you are. And also it takes a combination shape combined of everyone's thoughts in the room. So it was a very weirdly shaped place on what seemed to be an entirely separate planet that was or some section of a world that was large farming with people who were really strange farmers and interesting, but they had outbuildings and everything, and it was quite interesting. It was a kind of arid place, but it was really super nice. It wasn't uncomfortable weather-wise. The mountains were beautiful. It was just crazy, and I remember sitting and just feeling everything, feeling where I was. And this was no pinch me, I'm dreaming. This was nothing like that. It was crazy, and I know I probably could have stayed. But I just realized something was off about that too. I probably just couldn't in that moment. And so I didn't. I came back. And I told one person that I passed away. And I don't even know why I did that. I think I did that as an insurance policy. But I'm almost certain that one person probably didn't receive that call over here. I think I did that to make myself feel better, to reach out to just one person. It's really strange, but I think that had I made it permanent, I would have actually done more to reach out to others from that end, from that side, from that dimensional space, to say that I really was okay, and I'm no more quotes dead than the bird flying in the sky up there. The whole death thing is probably one of the biggest tales you can be told about something. I would say if you're running a scam, then the whole death industry is a scam. So anyway, it's one big scam to freak you out, and then when you realize you've been lied to and you've been had, you're already on the other side. Anyway, or over where your consciousness actually exists, or where it makes another world for itself or interacts with others. This is why I do the work that I do, and why I don't care if it's unpaid. It's not that kind of thing for me. If someone sponsors me to come and do a large talk and I get paid doing that, that's one thing. But insofar as clients and helping people out, there's no money going on in between that. I really felt like I needed to say this, to talk about it. I felt like I needed to talk about it and not keep it to myself. I wasn't expecting it to happen right after one of these events. I wasn't expecting any of that. So I just wanted you all to know what took place. So, and then I did suddenly come back, and I woke up very easily. I wasn't groggy or anything. I just opened my eyes and looked around and went, well, I guess I decided to come back. That's how I felt. Remembered I was in San Francisco, that I was at the Red Victorian, and I realized that I came back. I wasn't upset like I was the first time when my near-death experience happened, when I was not pleased to return when I came back, which I talk about in my radio stuff, and there's links to that. If I don't have any links to it in there, but I think my radio program has links in Messenger Guardians Facebook page, or I'll put it on my page, my main page. But I just came back and said, well, I decided to come back. What do you know? I wasn't upset. I was kind of neutral. but neutral good. Feeling okay. And was like, oh, that's interesting. What a trip that was. And I guess I didn't want to stay. But I realized how easy it would have been if I decided to, but all in all, it really wasn't time. So here I am, and I'm back. I thought I'd put that out there, and for folks who think I'm crazy and off my tough, well, great. I guess I can be tied down and iced and lobotomized and shock therapied and everything else where people who cannot handle alternate realities and other things that might be the case and that we don't have all the information would rather just torture us into being in a three-dimensional space, locking it down and believing that this is all there is. Okay, if that makes you feel good, then that's the space you're in. It's not the space I'm in. With that, everybody, I will say be well, go carefully. This is Glenn A. Sewell. I'll talk to you all later, and I'm also going to share this on Messenger Guardians Paranormal. Be well, everyone.